Hello, everybody, and welcome to Monday Night Travel with Rick Steves Europe. My name is Gabe Gunning, and I have the privilege of joining you all this evening as your moderator as we welcome Rick back to Monday Night Travel and hear about the lessons that he learned on his recent research trip to Europe. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome back to Monday Night Travel, Rick Steves. Rick, welcome back. We're so glad to have you.
Gabe, so nice to be back. I am
How was your
just,
trip?
I had a great trip. And when I took off on this trip, we pegged this date where I could come back and share everything I learned. And I knew I'd be eager to share the things that I did. And that's just what we're going to do today.
Well, we've had a lot of fun without you, going everywhere from Portugal to Tuscany to New Zealand. But we are very excited to have you back with us.
It is so great what you guys have been doing. I'm so thankful for your work. I'm proud of our team. And I know that a lot of people have enjoyed Monday Night Travel, as I've been enjoying every night travel over there in person. And Monday Night Travel is just a real blessing for people that want to be traveling, but right now they're not on the road. And every Monday we get a little dose of travel fun. In fact, I've tuned in on a couple of the Monday Night Travel events over the last month, and I just love it. You guys do a great job and getting wonderful, wonderful guests coming in. So good job.
You've been hidden out in the back of our virtual tour bus, and we didn't even know.
I've been enjoying it. Yeah, like incognito. And I just wanted to go to New Zealand with Cullen, and I wanted to go to Denmark with Dave and Yana. It's wonderful. And I know that next week we're taking off, but after that we have Steve Smith. It's going to take us to the Dordogne. And then 3 weeks from tonight, Anne Long, who lives in the Amalfi Coast, she's one of our wonderful guides. She's going to give us an intimate look at the Amalfi Coast, that romantic area south of Naples in Italy. After that, Rich Earl is going to take us to Barcelona and Catalonia. And then a month from tonight, or maybe 5 weeks from tonight, I'll be back and we'll be going to Amsterdam. But right now, I've got a pile of slides and I'd like to dive right in and take everybody on a whirlwind tour of what I did in the last 6 weeks. How's that sound?
That sounds great. I will leave it to you.
Okay, thank you, Gabe. And I'm going to be sipping my Barbera wine. This is Cana's Feast. It's an Oregonian vintner, and they're taking the third most planted grape in Italy, Barbera. It's a beautiful, beautiful wine. It's a full-bodied wine. It pairs nicely with my Gorgonzola cheese, my blue cheese, and my prosciutto. But I'd like to wish you all the very best, and I hope your travel dreams are going to be coming into reality here sooner or later. I'm telling you, Europe is ready. Europe is ready and eager. I was in the last 6 weeks, I went for the first 12 days, it was filming. We're working on this art show that I've been talking about for 2 years now, and we're just finishing it up. In 2 weeks from today, I'm going to be flying back for the last shoot. We're going to be in Belgium, Madrid, and Vienna to finish it up. But we just had a great shoot. I'll show you some photographs here in a few minutes to really get a lot of that art covered. And it's a 6-hour series. I got the good news from the network that every station in the country except for one, 140 cities said yes, one city said no. And don't even ask what the city is, because I don't know. I didn't want to know because I would have a hard time not flying there and asking them what's going on. Why don't you want to run the show? But essentially every city in the country is going to run the show this October, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But I went to London with a side trip out to Avebury for the megalithic stuff, and then went to Paris and a side trip to Amiens for some great Gothic, and then sent the film crew home, met up with Steve Smith, researched in Paris, then flew to, and I did for the next month, it was 4 nights and 3 days, basically, in every one of these cities in this order. And that's where we're going to go right now in the next hour. Athens, Milan, Venice, Florence, Munich, Salzburg, Vienna, Brussels, Bruges, and Amsterdam before flying home. It was a great trip. And I had it all figured out in my little grid, as I like to do. And everything was just boom, 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 figured out in advance. And it went smooth as could be. It was a busy time. Each day I had 2 guides. I had one guide at 10 o'clock to work with me during the day. Then I took a couple hours off. And then at 6 o'clock, I met another guide for the evening. And then I would do a few hours of typing around midnight. And then the next day I'd do it again. And I did this for 30 days in a row in 10 different cities. And I learned a lot. And I just want to give you a really quick blitz through that right now. So thank you for joining us. And right now, I'm just going to take you on a little swing through Europe. And this is a goofy kind of slideshow because I'm not covering the cities as much as just little things I learned, little fun stuff along the way. But here I am, ready to go to the airport. My son, Andy, drove me down to the airport, and I wanted to illustrate mobility. There you go. That's my luggage, whether 2 weeks or 2 months, winter, summer, north, south, it doesn't matter. That's what I pack. That's a carry on the airplane size bag. And it's a little day bag to be with me when I'm out and about. And it worked really well. On the way to Europe, I stopped at Fresno and I stopped at Redwood City for a couple of lectures. And it was fun to get back on the road and give some lectures about people who are going to be traveling. I'm rusty, I'm just rusty. I think all of us are, and we don't need to be slick. I mean, we've been in hibernation here for a couple of years. I remember I had leftovers from my lunch. I wanted to save it. I put it in the refrigerator at my hotel in Fresno, and it was the freezer, and it was time to eat my leftovers. It was a solid brick of ice. I had to thaw it out with my hair dryer. Never used a hair dryer for that before, but I just kind of laughed at myself, and I thought, we're all remembering how to travel again. Got to London, got together with the crew, and we went 2 hours west on the first morning to Avebury. And there's a place called the West Kennet Longborough, and we hiked up to that. I had never been there before. It's one of the most amazing megalithic sites. We filmed there, and then we went to Avebury, and it's just glorious weather in the spring. It happened, I thought it was going to be kind of peaceful, but it happened to be one of these solstice days, and all the druids were out. I mean, everybody was there playing their drums, and I couldn't get much peace and quiet to do my on cameras, but it was a fun time to be at Avebury. We got what we needed. This is Maddie. She runs Mad Max Tours. I've recommended her for over 20 years. She's based in Bath. She took a day off and made sure we knew just where to go to get the good shots. And we have Carl and my son, Andy. This is an odd tour because Simon, our producer, got COVID a couple of days before we took off. He couldn't go on the trip. So we scrambled, and Andy was able to reschedule his work, and he joined us, and he was the third person on the crew. Simon's fine now, but he was fully vaccinated and everything. But, it's just it's a sticky little thing, and he got it, and he couldn't make the trip. But we got everything we set out to get. We must have got 80 on cameras for the show. We had all of our permissions figured out beautifully. We were all alone in the British Museum. I mean, to be there with the mummies and to be there with the Elgin marbles. I mean, it was just an amazing thing. And then it opened up and we got a little bit of footage with people actually there. These are the famous Elgin marbles, but they're not called the Elgin marbles anymore because that's kind of bad news for England. It's kind of a scandal because in the year 1800, Lord Elgin and his buddies went to Athens, and in good British style, they just thought, hey, this is our empire, we'll take it home. And the treasures of Greece ended up in London. They've been there for 200 years, 220 years. And now they don't call them the Elgin marbles because it's just a kind of a bad PR. So they call it the Parthenon marbles. But you can, one way or another, you can see them in London and you can see them in Athens. Then we went to the National Gallery. The National Gallery, depending on how big and important you were as a country, as an empire in your glory days, that determines how much of the art you've got of Western civilization today, centuries later. There's a reason that the most important art collections in Europe are in Madrid, in Vienna, in Paris, and in London. And it's because of the power of their empires and their kings 200 and 300 years ago. Well, England, of course, was the empire upon which the sun never set. And it has an art gallery upon which the sun never sets today. And we were there connecting it all, getting the beautiful masterpieces, just lavishing detail and attention on them for our TV show. It's going to be so beautiful. We have things to cover. We got to cover the script. It's a 6-hour series. That means 90 pages of script. And, we talk about the romantic movement. We have forced bathing today. Well, they had forced bathing in the year 1800. And these dandies were out there in the woods reading their poems and being all nostalgic and romantic and everything. And we captured that, and we captured it beautifully. All along the way, I'm working on the guidebooks, working on the guided tours from our Rick Steves Audio Europe app, making sure our guidebooks are up to date so that when you go there, all the paintings are right where you think they'll be. Lots of stuff going on in Europe, and it was so fun to be there with the camera to document it. For instance, when you get to London, you'll find Big Ben is newly restored, and it is gorgeous. So we had to get the camera out and shoot a little bit of Big Ben. Sunny day, glittering, newly restored bell tower, Big Ben. Let's nail that thing. Lots of new tech innovations for us travelers. These days, you use your tap card, your debit card, and you just tap technology. In London, you don't use the Oyster card anymore. You just tap it, and you get billed for each ride you take at the same good Oyster card price. Plenty of new innovations that make travel smoother and slicker, and we've got to adapt. Also, it's a small world, and there's a lot of the same struggles in Europe and the same challenges going on in Europe that we're having in the United States, divided societies, people afraid of immigrants, people afraid of change, people, reacting to other people's thoughts about gay rights or whatever. I mean, in Florida, it's don't say gay. And in London now you got traffic signs that say, yes, let's say gay everywhere we look, because we're all in this together and we're all equal. All over Europe now, you find traffic signs are sort of an answer to regressive American policies that are going backwards when it comes to gay rights. But that's a whole nother lecture. We went from London to Paris. I had such a good time traveling with my son, Andy. And he's right now leading one of our tours. I'll show you a picture of him later on, but he's in Venice tonight with his Rick Steves tour group. But Andy was just great with us as we had our tight little crew. This is us. There's just three of us. Carl, the amazing cameraman, Andy, knowing just what to do with the lights and helping out in so many ways, and me trying to remember my lines. This is out the window of the Louvre Palace, the Louvre Museum, the biggest museum in Europe, at the famous pyramid entry. And, these museums have not just been slumbering. They've been hard at work during pandemic time, and they've got a lot of improvements since then. When they opened up in the Louvre, you've got the Michelangelo slaves are back in their spot after a couple of years gone. And this slave just reminds me of Europe waking up after a long pandemic time. And today the streets are busy, the restaurants are busy, the museums are busy, and we're back at it. With our work, we have to get permission in advance, and they like us to be there when they're closed. So we'd be at the museum on the day it's closed. Here we are, all alone in the Orsay Gallery, filming the Impressionist masterpieces. I often wondered, what do they do with these big museums when they close? Is it just downtime? No, the closed days are as busy as the open days. That's when people do their, the film crews are there. That's when they do the renovating and moving art around. And that's when a lot of school groups come in. I was very impressed by the attentive school kids there, sitting right there in front of the art. They wouldn't show this kind of art to our school kids. I think people would be upset about the nudity, but Europe's not that hung up on things like this. And the kids have a healthier approach to, I think, their body and to art. We did a Facebook post about this phenomenon where you have school kids learning about the art in Europe, and it's on our Facebook page. Got a million views. It's just a fascinating thing how Europe exposes its kids to the high art of Europe. As we were doing our work, we needed to cover our script. And when we have a hole in the script, we got to find a way to fill it. I mean, we talk about Napoleon. We needed some portraits of Napoleon. I found a beautiful portrait of Napoleon in the Orsay Gallery, so we shot that. I was also looking for some fun modern art, interactive art, and I certainly found that in Paris. Here's a bench that makes you feel really small, Lily Tomlin style. And that's out of town at the La Défense suburb, the industrial center, or the business park. And just so much fun. You come up the metro station, and there it is, this massive park bench, and you can climb up on that and have a little fun with your camera. We were very fortunate with the weather. Beautiful opportunity to get some nice on cameras in the can. When you say the rallying cry of the Impressionists in 1880 was out of the studio and into the open air, well, you better have some beautiful open air to shoot to say that. And we found it there in the Tuileries. I had some big holes in my script for the Gothic coverage, and I needed another wonderful Gothic cathedral. And we went out to Amiens, Amines. It's 2 hours north of Paris. And whoa, I've done a lot of traveling. I've never been to Amiens, and look at that cathedral. And this is in a town that has almost no tourism because this town was bombed in World War I. And all it has is today is it's a nondescript town with a lot of memorials to the war and one magnificent cathedral. So we got to spend a lot of time filming here inside and out. And that was just a beautiful experience. Look at those slender, elegant Gothic lines. With the crew, we didn't spend a lot of time eating out in London, but when we got to Paris, I made a point every night, took the crew out to a wonderful restaurant and got to kind of eat my way through the leading restaurants that are in our guidebook in Paris. That was a lot of fun. Also, this is 2 months ago now when I started this trip. And it was when we were sort of getting our tour program back in gear. And it was the first week or two of touring with Rick Steves tour buses. And it was a little dicey, I got to say. And Relinka Blooming, one of our most experienced and senior guides, wonderful guide, Relinka, she was having her group with their opening dinner at one of our favorite restaurants in Paris. And I had to swing by and say hi to everybody. And there was such a joy. There was a joy for the restaurateurs and the wait staff. There was a joy with Relinka and our guides, a joy with our bus drivers, and of course, a joy with all of our tour members as we are back on the road. It's a beautiful thing. Oh, I'm so thankful. Today, we've got 60 buses in the road in Europe, 1,500 tour members, and it's so nice to get our guides back in the saddle. This is a kind of a funny painting that I filmed in the Orsay Gallery. I think of it as the early megalithic tour bus, but it just reminds me in those early days, it was a little bit scary to be doing the tours, but now we're kind of old hat at it and it's going really well. And I'm just thankful that Europe has got it together and tourism is back on the road. Well, the crew went home and I met up with Steve Smith, my co-author. And what I love to do with Steve, he's the driving force. He's our in-house Francophile behind the best-selling, most important guidebook to Paris published in the United States. And there's a lot of guidebooks to Paris, I got to say. But Steve is just brilliant. And I love to spend a little time every year with Steve in Paris, updating our Paris book and updating our France book. And I dedicated several days with Steve. Just in the daytime, him and I would split up and do different sightseeing activities for the book. And at night, we'd get together and we'd visit our favorite restaurants. And we have to visit all the restaurants in the book. And we have a lot of friends. This is Laurent, who runs Le Florimonde, and it's one of our favorite restaurants in Paris. And we check in on him. And I was so thankful that the little restaurants, the little mom and pops survived the pandemic, something really to be thankful for. And I think it's because we focus on places that do not totally rely on tourism for their livelihood. These are popular with local people. And if a restaurant or a hotel was only touristy during the pandemic, they would have no income and they would likely not survive. But our places, the places we promote and recommend, are local favorites as well as good for our travelers. And they had business right through the pandemic. They had local patronage, they had government support, and now they're still standing and welcoming the international tourists as we get back on the road. This is a man who runs a little hotel on my favorite street in Paris, Rue Claire, and it was fun to stay in this hotel. Every chance I get, I'll stay in a new hotel to experience that for the sake of the guidebook, for the sake of families like this. This is an American family that was having a great time. Look at those kids having an adventure and using our guidebook as their guide. Through all of those cities, I was working on our Rick Steves Audio Europe tours. It's one big part of our program. It's an app, Rick Steves Audio Europe. It is totally free. There are 60 self-guided tours, and I wanted to do those tours, and we're going to make sure they're all accurate. There's a lot of little tweaks that need to be made. They've been out for 5 or 10 years now. 1 million people download this app every year and use it in Europe. The one new tour I'm doing is the Champs-Élysées. So I had to go down the Champs-Élysées and take photographs of the places featured on that walk for the new tour, but shot a few photographs for the new versions of the tours. And we had to get up to date. For instance, in the Paris walk, the Notre Dame is a big deal. But of course, we didn't anticipate the fire, and we got to acknowledge the fire, and we got to explain to people, you can't get into the church, but you can certainly enjoy the west facade. And if you know to go down the left-hand side, you'll find a whole series of murals in English with great photographs that explain what's going on with the heroic work of putting the Notre Dame back together after that tragic fire. And then if you have a good guidebook or a good audio tour, like the ones that we produce, you'll know that if you want a good view of the Notre Dame now, you got to go across the river. And there's a beautiful spot, a beautiful perch right there across the river where you can see what's happening with the great Gothic cathedral in Paris. Each night, for the last 45 nights in Europe, I have been out looking at restaurants. It's so much fun. I just love it. And here I am with Steve Smith. Steve's talking to the manager there, and I'm just kind of floating around, getting a sense of the energy. And would our travelers like this place? Should we put it in the book? And what if we do, how should we describe it? One of the little tricks that Steve and I've learned is that if a place is full, you go up and you say, do you have a place to eat for 2? And they say, did you make a reservation? We say no, and they say, no, we're all full. Then you say, can we eat at the bar? And they say, well, sure. and you sit at the bar and you have the same food, the same menu. You get a little quicker than other people, and you get a front row seat on all the action in the kitchen. That's a kind of a nice tip all over Europe. Remember, you can sit at the bar. A very strange phenomenon to me in Europe is the advent of all of these over-the-top American junk food stores. I don't know what is going on, but there's a huge market for this now in Europe. And we didn't put it in our book, but it was kind of curious to pop into this and see what it's like. Said goodbye to Steve and then headed to Greece, flew to Athens. And I was filming there 4 or 5 months ago. And it was so great to be there. I just promised myself I'm coming back with the guidebook to update it because I wanted to be sure I've got the best restaurants and the latest information for sightseeing in that great city. Athens, I was there in April. What a wonderful time to be there. It was cool. It wasn't crowded. Beautiful floodlit Parthenon on top of the hill at the Acropolis, and a great chance to connect with a city where almost half of all the Greek people live. I mean, there's 10 million people in Greece. 4 million of them are in Athens. It used to be notorious for traffic jams and pollution and all that. Now they've done really good job of cutting back on the traffic, cutting back on the pollution, and making the city feel fun for individuals, for pedestrians. Here you see a street that used to be congested with cars. Now it's got tram lines, it's got a few taxis, and a lot of pedestrians. All over Europe, I get to see Americans with my guidebook, with my little day bag, having a great time. And in Athens, that was no exception. And to see these people all with the same bag that I've got, that's the bag you see with me in all my shows. And they were using the Athens book, the Greece book, and they were having the time of their life. It's so much fun for me to be able to quiz them and ask them, what can I do better in the guidebook? How can we make this better? That night, I was heading out to a restaurant where one of our groups was dining, and the guide was Apostolos. And I was a few minutes late and they were a few minutes early, and I met him on the street coming home from the restaurant. And it was just really nice to see him. Here you can see those big smiles. These are Americans on a Rick Steves bus tour. Small group. There's just about a dozen people there instead of 24. Our fill rate has not been a priority as we get our tours going again. Our priority is to get our guides back in the saddle, our buses back on the road, and just to make sure we can reconnect with all the wonderful providers in Europe that make a tour a success. Part of my mission, along with all the research, was to connect with new guides and to find good guides all over Europe who then I can find out if they would be interested in working with us as in our tour department. This is Philippos. I had a wonderful day with him. He took me out to the new National Gallery in Greece. It's just a short walk from Syntagma Square. And it's kind of like the Greek Orsay Gallery, all the art from Greece since 1850 on. Oh yeah, did I tell you I'm drinking Barbera wine? Barbera is a beautiful grape from northern Italy, I believe. It's one of the most popular grapes in Italy. And if you see that word Barbera, I think you can, if you like full-bodied wine, you can go with it. It pairs very nicely with your heavy cheese, your gorgonzola, and your prosciutto. And it takes me back to Italy. It's a beautiful thing. All right, but we're in Greece here and we're drinking Retsina, that resin-flavored wine, which is kind of nostalgic, let's put it that way. This is a hole-in-the-wall restaurant. Had so much fun checking out these restaurants. I mean, they are so amazing. They are so real. They are so cheap. They are so Greek. There's not a tourist in sight. And you can go there in this city. I mean, you just got to equip yourself with good information and expect yourself to travel smart. You got to be willing to get yourself out of your comfort zone. Remember, culture shock's a good thing. It's the growing pains of a broadening perspective. You can enjoy it. From Athens, I flew to Milano. And I cannot get enough of the Duomo in Milano. Look at that. That is flamboyant Gothic, baby. Over the top, the last flame-like flowering of the Gothic movement before whatever came next, Renaissance domes. And here we have the main square, looking up at the great cathedral in Milan. That is sort of the epicenter of all the people action in the city. And from that church, you can climb up onto the rooftop. And when you're on the rooftop, you can gaze out at the city, just like the statues that cap every one of those spires have done for 800 years. Imagine, for 700 years, that statue has been sitting there looking out at the city as it grows. And this is the face of God, the Father in heaven, looking down on the church from the top of the ceiling where the ribs come together. That'd be 40 meters above you or something like that. You wouldn't be able to see all these details, but now it's in a museum, in the Duomo Museum. There are some great museums of the cathedral. Museo del Duomo. I'm thinking Florence and I'm thinking Milan, two of my favorite underestimated museums in Europe. They've got the great art of that particular cathedral. A chance to get so close to the gargoyle, you can smell his breath. Imagine seeing all the gargoyles lined up in that amazing cathedral. Chances to put things together to understand better the makeup of the city. Remember, medieval cities in Europe have a ring road today because 500 years ago, they had a circular wall. And then when the country became established with a central government and no need to fortify cities anymore and congested traffic, what do? You rip down that wall and you got a circular boulevard. And you find that all over Europe. You look at the map of London, of Paris, of Florence, of Rome, of Milan, of Vienna, you see a ring road. And that ring road is the echo of the old medieval wall. A tragic sight in Milano is the Holocaust memorial at the train station, where they would roll away thousands and thousands of Jews from Milan to concentration camps in the East. And it's a powerful news site. And whenever there's a news site in Europe, and I'm updating my guidebooks, I go there, I visit it, I learn about it, and if it merits a spot in the book, I write it up. I've always got my local guide who can remind me, hey, you got to know about this, you got to know about that. This is Lorenza. She's been with me for 20 years as I research Milano. And we just had a delightful time together, finding out things that are just not happening now because of COVID. We went to my favorite deli, my gourmet deli, Peck, it's called, in Milano. And downstairs in this wonderful, high-end gourmet grocery store, they had this amazing wine tasting counter. I loved it. And today it's totally mothballed because with COVID, you can't have a public wine tasting like that. It's just not safe. So there are some, a few little things that you could do before that you can't do now. You can't kiss the Blarney Stone. You can't kiss the toe of St. Peter and St. Paul or you can't kiss the toe of St. Peter and St. Peter's Basilica. You can't get, your buffet of finger foods in a lot of places that used to enjoy serving you the smorgasbord. But generally in Europe, you're experiencing Europe essentially like it was before. But if you're traveling like I was and like our tour members are, you got your mask handy. And when you go in public transit, you slap it on. It's not a big deal. I just wear it like a scarf. It's in my breast pocket. Whenever I go into public transit, whenever I go into a museum, if I am in a crowded spot, I'll just put on my mask. I don't really care if it's, if it's required, of course I'll wear it. But a lot of times I wear my mask when other people are not, even if it's not required, just because I want to stay safe. It's a small price to pay to protect people around me from me and to protect me from them. Be vaccinated, have your CDC card, and have your mask handy. For 40 years, I've been, writing my notes and then going back to the hotel and typing it up. And in recent years, I notice I need a little more light to see my notes. And sometimes I have a hard time reading it if there's not good light. And I found there's the best light in the hotel is in your bathroom, in the room. So you just, you sit on the toilet and you bring a little table in there and you got yourself a very well-lit office. I spent more time than usual on this last month in the bathroom doing my work because the bright light is such a great thing when you're trying to do that. Hey, from Milan, I took the train and Italy's got a wonderful train system. I had my tickets all bought in advance and it's just very slick, and took the bullet train from there over to Venice. Coming into Venice, look at the greenery. I can never remember views of Venice with greenery as for the frame. And that's the new Royal Gardens just outside of the Doge's Palace there. And it's the legal place to have a picnic when you're in Venice. But that's the view from the Carrere Museum looking over at Santa Maria Margherita and Santa Maria Maggiore. And what a beautiful, beautiful view. My goodness, wandering around Venice. I had to stop, even though I was doing my work, and I've been there many, many times. I had to stop and just go, pinch me. This is just too darn beautiful. I love being on the loggia, looking out over St. Mark's Square and the people backlit in the late afternoon sun. There you go. The energy of Venice. Remember, it's crowded, and it's crowded with people who are all going to the same places. We're talking about herd immunity. We've already got herd mentality when it comes to sightseeing. Everybody wants to do the same stuff. Well, if you want to go to the famous site, you better get a ticket in advance if it's required or if it's recommended. And that's one thing I made a point to do in all of my research with every city. I have a sidebar that leads into it, and it says, if you're going to Florence, if you're going to Paris, if you're going to Amsterdam, and you want to see this, that, and that, you got to get a reservation. But you don't need a reservation for anything else. And while you're at it, get a reservation for one meal in a nice hotel, in a nice restaurant, because that is a challenge these days as well. There's so many people eating out. There's a vengeance travel. People are getting back on the road and they're traveling and they just want to have that experience. And consequently, it can be crowded. Here we have the gate, the line for the Doge's Palace. And on one side, you got a long line, and that's for people who need to buy a ticket. And on the other side, you got almost no line because that's for people that already have their ticket and they go straight in. And the rewards are wonderful, whether you have to wait in that line or not. This is the fish market in Venice, and I'm taking it because this picture because there's almost no fish there. This is the change in the last decade. There's just not that many people buying raw fish from the merchants in the fish market like they have for centuries. And consequently, today the market is empty and there's just a few fish stalls at the very end. What you have in the markets all over Europe today are merchants that are selling goofy little edible eateries or gifty edibles instead of basic produce to locals. And that's what the market is. The market has changed. These people are staying in an Airbnb apartment. That Airbnb apartment used to have locals staying in it, but they can't afford the rent anymore because landlords can get more with Airbnb. Consequently, the people that made that market viable have moved out to the suburbs. And today, if the market's going to stay in business, it's got to sell stuff to the people staying in the Airbnb. And that is potpourri, that is slushies, that is exotic fruit on skewers. It's changing the character of the colorful marketplaces all over Europe. This is just a beautiful scene here. You got a cute little bar that has a cute little restaurant and a cute little menu, handwritten, one language. It's and it's small. They're just cooking up what they can cook economically and affordably. And you'll see there it's 15 euros for a bowl of spaghetti in a nice little restaurant in Venice. Add $5 for your glass of wine. You got yourself a $20 meal. It's not cheap, but it's not going to break the bank. And that is in the most expensive city in Italy. So, you know, it's expensive in Europe now, but you can eat affordably if you know how to. And, you know, if you're seeing people eating zucchini flour pizza, that's the in-season specialty. Go for it. I am such a fan of you eating the daily specials. That's not on the push list. That's on the smart eaters take advantage of this list. That's on the chef wants to serve this to you because it's tastier and cheaper list. That's the local seasonal specialty. Go for that. Eat with the locals, eat with the season, and you will do better. That's one of the themes in our new book, Italy for Food Lovers. I wish I could have it out right now, but it takes a while in the publishing world to get things onto the bookshelf. But by the end of this year, we will have a new book. It's a tome. I think it's 600 pages, and it is filled with delightful photographs and practical tips for every region in Italy, how to eat your way through Italy with the help of my favorite Italian gourmet, Fred Plotkin. From Venice, we got out our flat map that had Europe in the center, and we figured out where we want to go next. And it was Florence, 3 hours away by train. And I just can't get enough of Florence, and neither can the rest of the tourists. And they've got endless ways that they can try to sort through the crowds and the sites and make sure that they get their money and everybody gets their sightseeing jollies. And in Florence now, you got 3 new passes: the Ghiberti Pass, the Giotto Pass, and the Brunelleschi Pass. It's just important for us travelers to know what the passes are. And if they're a good deal to get them, they'll save you money, but they will also save you time, because when you get that pass, you don't have to wait in line. And there's no way to get to the top of the dome without getting your Brunelleschi Pass. No, yeah, the Brunelleschi Pass. That's the one that goes to the top of the dome, I believe. I had so much fun visiting all the fancy restaurants and the old school cafeterias, all the little eateries that are in my book. This is a cool place here. It's the cheapest hot meal in town, and it's upstairs. It's where the locals eat. It's a mensa, and we can eat there too. A lot of the kids are just eating sandwiches, sitting on the steps of famous buildings. There's a lot of tacky, commercial, gimmicky sites that are lassoing a lot of naive travelers, and they're just kits. You could buy it and set it up in your town. There's no artifacts in a museum like this. This is just something that is an economic adventure. Whether it's a Da Vinci museum, if it's a Salvador Dali thing, if it's a torture device place, torture museums. These are what you find around Europe, and they're all the same. There's no artifacts, and frankly, I would steer clear. They're not like the other honest to goodness museums. And that's what I wrote that night in my bathroom. This is my nightly adventure. I go through my guidebook and I line up all the restaurants I want to visit. I put them in a smart geographical order. I take a back of my business card and I try to print as clearly as I can the sites. This is 18 restaurants in a row. And I give that to my guide, Paula, tonight. And we just hit the ground running and we visit all of these places in 3 or 4 hours. And then I go home and write it up. How was my dinner? Frankly, not very good tonight. But I visited all these restaurants and I accomplished a lot, and the guidebook is better for it. I was very afraid when I went to Europe on this trip that I'd find a lot of this closed down little businesses, and I didn't. Thank goodness. I was so thankful. And the little mom and pops survived. The touristy places, a lot of them didn't survive. A lot of places have been sold and bought out by other companies and so on. But the little labors of love, the entrepreneurial ventures, the little mom and pops that really characterize each town, that make a Rick Steves guidebook, they survived. I'm so thankful about that. And by the way, if you're traveling this year, the only guidebook you're going to have to use is one that was from before the pandemic, because nobody has been able to do their post-pandemic research yet. We did it as soon as possible, and our books won't come out until the end of the year because that's just the nature of the beast. So you'll be using 2019 information in your travels this year. It works. What you just got to do is call in advance if it's an important visit or an important restaurant, because you don't know if it's actually open today because they have a hard time getting employees, just like we do here in a lot of cases. So museums are only half open. Restaurants are not open every day. And you need to call in advance to confirm that, or you'll be frustrated along the way. So from Florence, I was going to fly to Munich, but I got bumped off my flight because it was windy and 10 people just weren't allowed on the plane. So I had to take a bus down to Bologna and spend a night in Bologna. And the only thing good about that was I got to eat a bologna sandwich in the city where it was named for, Bologna. And next morning at 6 o'clock, I caught the plane that I was supposed to be in the night before, and I got to Munich. But right now, I want to put a strawberry in my mouth and go back to Gabe and see if we can answer some questions, because in a moment, we're going to carry on north of the Alps. We're going to go up to Munich. But right now, Gabe, let's have some questions if we have any.
Yes, we have a lot of good questions, Rick. We'll just ask a few right now, and then we will get to more questions at the end. First, I have a question for Joseph, from Joseph. There are a lot of travelers these days that, during the COVID era, we're always having to do all this mental arithmetic and risk assessment. And what would you say to travelers that are trying to weigh if they want to go to Europe this year and risk maybe having to quarantine, risk some of those uncertainties versus waiting until 2023?
Gabe, I think I'm a good person to ask because I've been there 3 times. We've got our tour program and we have regular meetings to assess the risk and what's the story and what's the latest. First of all, I can't say what's safe for you because it depends on your willingness to take a risk. I've gone to Europe 3 times in the last year, and I've had 3 amazing trips. I'm going twice again this summer. I'm going filming in 2 weeks, and then I'm going on a vacation with my girlfriend, and we're going to cruise on a canal in Burgundy. We're going to go hiking in the Alps. It's a risk. What is the risk? Well, these days, anybody who's fully vaccinated and boosted is very, very unlikely to end up seriously sick or going to the hospital. But there's a good chance you're going to test positive, and then you can't fly back to the United States. I just had to get my test, 3 times in the last few months to get on a plane to fly to the States. 2 weeks ago in Amsterdam, I went to the pharmacy, got my test, and I asked him, how many tests did you give yesterday? And he said 85. And I said, how many positives? He said 1. So that's pretty cool. Now, these were all Americans because Americans are the ones that need to get a test to fly home. Other people don't need a test to fly home because the United States is the only one that I know that's still requiring that in the West. And so 1 in 85 chance. Now I can take that risk. Our tour program, I was just talking to Michelle in our tour, who runs our tour department here at Rick Steves Europe. We got 60 tours in Europe right now, 1,500 tourists on 60 tours. And we probably have 30 people in a week that are testing positive. 30 people, that's a lot of people, but out of 1,500, that's 2%. So in this game of COVID roulette, the odds are 1 in 50, if you're on a Rick Steves tour, that you will test positive and have to delay your flight home. None of these people had to go to the hospital. Most of these people are asymptomatic. Almost everybody would not have known that they had COVID if they didn't have to get tested before they flew home. Consequently, they learned at the end of their tour, they finished the tour, and then they have to cancel their flight, rebook it a week later, and they got to lay low for 5 days or however long it takes to get a negative test in Europe. That's a drag. That's expensive. You want to get home, all that, but you're not going to have to go to the hospital. And that's just a risk you take to travel these days. I think there's that risk, but there's also your ability to minimize that risk by traveling smartly, especially for the last week of your trip. I don't go to, if I see a bar that looks really interesting and it's just packed and there's no ventilation and it's filled with people that are likely not to be vaccinated and boosted, I don't go there. The way I travel, it's well ventilated. I surround myself with people who seem like the kind of people who would believe in getting a shot. And I feel like I'm a lot safer, and I wear my mask when I feel like there's a need to wear the mask. If you have that kind of a standard, I think you're even a lot safer than the average traveler in Europe. So I think if you can't handle that, go next year. But if you can handle that, you got a 98% chance of getting through it without a bump. And it's a lot of fun to be over there.
Another question that we have is from Kathy, and you were mentioning Venice, and there's been kind of these rumors swirling for a while that Venice is going to have a visitor's tax. And prior to the pandemic, there was a big discussion around over tourism in cities like Amsterdam, Barcelona, Florence, Venice. Have you seen any measures as you return to travel that these cities have taken to try to combat over tourism?
Barcelona, Venice, Amsterdam, a few cities like that, it really was a problem in 2019. The big discussion was they're just too crowded, And I was in Paris on a holiday weekend, and it was so crowded. I just thought, man, this is scary. It was really crowded. And this was just a month ago. But I think, Europe is affluent. There's a lot of people traveling there. There's nobody from Asia there right now. And that's a big part of the crowd, but no Asian groups are in Europe right now. But there's a lot of Europeans traveling, a lot of Americans traveling. And part of the problem is, Gabe, everybody wants to go to the same place. You got to get over that. There's, 80% of the people are in 10% of the places. And if you didn't have those 10% of the places as options, you'd still have a great time in Europe. So you don't need to go to the crowded places. You can go to the crowded places, but if you really want to minimize the crowds, remember, second cities. Everybody goes to Paris. What about Marseille, Lyon? What about everybody goes to Lisbon? See Lisbon in a hurry, but hang out in Porto. Everybody goes to Edinburgh. What about Glasgow? Everybody goes to Dublin. What about Belfast? There's a lot of places that everybody goes to Seattle. What about Tacoma? There's a lot of places that don't get the love they deserve. And there's happening stuff in these second cities. Really, I noticed that a lot. I was just in Bristol, out beyond Bath, and it's an amazing place in England. I was telling the story earlier. I was in Amsterdam, and every time I go to Amsterdam, I just walk by Anne Frank's to see how long the crowd is. And it's, usually it's a 200-yard long line, people waiting hours to get into Anne Frank's house. I was there last week, 2 weeks ago, and Anne Frank, 25 people standing outside of her door. What's the deal? Timed admissions. You can't get in without a timed admission. Nobody bothers going there because you're going to go in at 1:30 and there's 25 people with you, and that's it. And then come back at 2:00, you see. So it was the same way at the Last Supper in Milano. Timed entries, no more mob scene, very orderly. And museums are liking this timed entry stuff. It's not good for people that are reluctant to go online and book something in advance, but it's great if you're willing to do that. It works really well. I'm about the last person that would be signing up for things in advance online. It's not my style, but I'm realizing it doesn't matter what's my style. That's the smart way to travel.
Rick, we have time for one more question in this first Q&A. It comes from Gary, and Gary's wondering if we can get a little teaser on a new addition to one of the guidebooks that you're excited about. Was there a new site or a new restaurant that you were especially eager to find and put in the guidebooks?
We're blitzing Europe, and we're just our initiative, and my book department chief made it really clear. We're not here to expand the books. We're here to make them accurate and to make sure everything works that's in there. So our mission was not to find new things, but I had to focus everywhere on new romantic restaurants. I love to remember that people are not just looking for a cheap cafeteria meal. I mean, you need that to make ends meet a lot of times, but in every city, you should spring for a $50 or $60 meal if you can afford it. That really is going to be a lifelong memory. And I really enjoyed finding those places. And Gabe, what I found was something called chef's surprises. I noticed this in a lot of cities. My favorite restaurant was a gourmet restaurant that was accessible and affordable because they only offered a chef's surprise. So the chef is going to pull out all the stops. He's going to give it first class. It's going to be all with your amuse bush and your amuse everything else. And it's not going to be expensive because he's serving what he wants to serve, what he wants to shop for, what is seasonal. And if you are bold enough just to go to the restaurant and say, make me happy, here's $50. It's going to be a great experience. And I found those kind of restaurants and I put them in my book. And that alone makes me want to go back to a lot of those cities because I'm just dying to give that, just really enjoy that because that is a beautiful, beautiful evening. So that'd be my discovery. Chef surprises. Go to those upper end places that are not pretentious. And be willing to trust the chef. The menus are very simple. Do you want vegetarian or not? And do you want 3 courses, 5 courses, or 7 courses? That's it. That is it. And do you want wine pairing?
You've convinced me.
And it's a great experience. Okay. Hey, I'm going to go back to the, thanks for those questions, Gabe, and we'll do some more in a few minutes, but I want to blitz people through the rest of this. And God, I'm sorry I'm talking so fast, but there's just a lot to cover. And I'm having fun sharing it. And I just had a great time. I do want to remind people, it's so fun for me to be able to share these adventures on Facebook. And I've got a lot of video clips coming up, beautiful stories, wonderful people I've met, all sorts of adventures and surprises. And it's every day on Facebook. So check out Rick Steves on Facebook. Go ahead and subscribe. It's not going to bite you. And then every time I've got something fun to share that I never have time to talk about elsewhere, and it's very candid and intimate and insider stuff, you'll be right there. And a lot of it is video clips with my new favorite guides in different spots around Europe. Okay. Something I saw all over Europe was yellow and blue flags. And of course, that is Ukraine. And I was really impressed by the solidarity in Europe for Ukraine. And I want to remind you that it is reasonable for an American to think, is it okay to go to Europe with what's going on in Ukraine? Is it ethical? Well, yes, it is. There's nothing unethical about having a vacation when a country like that is suffering. We are powers for peace when we go and learn about each other and we become Americans with broader perspectives. And we help out people's economies who might be hurt by the war. We just had our first Poland tour finished just last week. We had 5 guides on the tour with 15 lucky tourists, and the new Rick Steves Poland program is off and running, and they had the time of their life. But from my experience, there's no inconvenience for a traveler in Europe because of Ukraine. Of course, Europe is in wonderful solidarity with Ukraine, and you'll learn a lot about that as you travel, and you'll see that flag all around. I made friends with so many new guides. This is Birgit, and she is so wonderful. And she took me around Munich, and she's going to be in the new edition of the book. I'll tell you, one thing I do when I'm researching these, using the services of these guides, I'm testing them to see if they're any good. If they're good, I put them in the book so you can book them too. But this church was bombed down in 1945 and rebuilt, and the men were all dead or gone, and it was the rubble women that scraped through these cities, and they sorted through the broken bricks, and the ladies would pick up the bricks. If they were broken, they'd throw them away, and they'd end up in hills that are now wooded and hills on the edge of town. And the usable bricks were cleaned off and put in a pile. And today they are back in their place in the church with the new bricks. And Birgit told me this amazing story about the rubble women who sorted through the bricks and made it possible to rebuild that great cathedral that now is open, and you can go to the top of the spire. With Birgit, I went through the market, the Victualian market, and I got to know so much about how the market stays so vibrant and where you can get the cheapest hot meal in town. What a beautiful meal of stumpf and kraut and sausages and senf and all those wonderful specialties. And then I went with her brother who's a guide, and I was worrying about her brother Michael because she was so good. I thought, well, I hope the brother's okay because he'll feel bad if he's not recommended. Also, he was just as good. I got a twofer there with Birgit and her brother Michael. But went out to Nymphenburg Palace. Look at the Rococo there, man. That's really wild. And I wanted to learn more about that for my TV work because we are going back to Europe to shoot some Rococo. And the carriages of the day. And when you got tea and coffee, you need something fancier than a pewter mug. What are you going to do? Let's have some china. So we had a need for the aristocrats and the royal families to have their own china works, their own porcelain works, so they could have their Meissen porcelain and so on. In Munich, there's a lot of Michael Jackson fans. And when he died, they took over a underappreciated statue and they turned it into the Michael Jackson Memorial. And I put that in my audio tour 5 or 6 years ago. And I thought, probably not a good idea because I might not be there in the future. The authorities clean it up every 6 months or so. And the Michael Jackson fans put all their favorite memorabilia back up and they remember Michael right there. So that's still alive and well in Munich. 2 hours south from Munich, you get to Salzburg. Oh, just look at this view. It's late at night. You could play chess there in the square. You got modern art on the right. You got the biggest castle in Europe, floodlit on the hill straight ahead of you. Salzburg. This is not a Ukrainian flag. That happens to be a Vatican flag. And Salzburg is a very important part of the Vatican world, the Catholic world, and a lot of great cathedrals and churches and music and relics in Salzburg. This is a beautiful pedestrian-only street early in the morning. A lot of Americans are skeptical about pedestrian-only streets. How are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? What about this? What about that? Well, Europe figures that all out, and they've got it now where the people and the merchants like their pedestrian-only streets in a way that most Americans could hardly imagine. And there's a practical reality. In the morning, it's not pedestrian. Up until 9 o'clock, from 6 until 9 o'clock, it's wide open for trucks and vans and service vehicles. And then at 9 o'clock, the vehicles are gone, the barriers go up, and it becomes a friendly people zone. When I was in Salzburg, there's 2 Mozart sites, and people don't want to go to 2 Mozart sites. They want to go to the best one. So I get to go to both of them, describe them, and recommend in what case would you go to this one, and in what case would you go to that one. In what I learned, I gained an appreciation for how much traveling Mozart did. Just a little kid in a carriage, a horse-drawn carriage. Imagine, in the rock and roll concert tours, when you have a sweatshirt in the back, it has lists all the cities where the concert is. Mozart's tour, look where all the places he went. He spent 3,700 days on the road giving piano concerts. And you learn all about that when you go to his museum in Salzburg, where he was born and raised. Salzburg. I was so excited to get all the information. This is just an example of all the beautiful information I get to pick up from my guides. And that is all massaged into the text on the laptop and emailed home. And now it'll be in the new Salzburg book. Here's Vienna, just like we looked at Milan with the Circle Road. The same kind of engineer designed the city's fortifications here. And Vienna needed that until modern times, when it was just an ingrown wall that contributed to the congestion of all the traffic. So they tore it down, and they have Vienna's ring road today. Stop the War, that's the cathedral in the middle of that ring road. And Stop the War at the secession building in Vienna. A lot of solidarity with Ukraine. I went in Vienna to a church where I expected just to do a visit to see the altarpiece and so on. And no, it's not open for tourism right now or worship right now, because it is a center for all the goods that people are donating to give the refugees in Ukraine. That's a good example right there of the solidarity in Europe for the people of Ukraine. Wonderful sights to see in Venice, the palaces and so on, and the marketplaces, the Kunsthistorisch, no, what is it called? The Naschmarkt, the Nibbles Market. I think that's the translation. I took a guide of the Naschmarkt, a food guide, and had a wonderful time learning about it. And then I can better describe it in my guidebook for all of my travelers. A big trend you see all over Europe is bank buildings. Once, venerable and exquisite and sumptuous and all that kind of stuff. And then the banks of today realize, hey, we don't need to pay this rent and we don't need to impress people with our building. Let's move out into the suburbs. And these fancy bank buildings are left wondering, what are we going to do now? In London, a lot of them are fancy pubs. And in Vienna, the biggest bank building is now a grocery store in an amazing building. It's just kind of fun to see how things morph through the ages. Like hamburgers. Hamburgers are not an American fast food treat for a lot of people. They are a gourmet specialty in Europe. If you're thinking about gourmet hamburgers in Europe, it's not eating American, it's eating local. That's what local people like to do these days. And it's worth having that on your list. Vienna, I'm going to be there in a couple of weeks with the crew right here in Maria Theresa's Art Museum, the Kunsthistorische Museum, in part because I want to stand in front of this sketch by Rubens. And I'm going to say to the camera, this little sketch is Rubens' masterpiece plan. He would make the sketch, and then his students in his studio would take the big canvas and they would transcribe. They would paint the big masterpiece from the sketch by the master, and then Rubens would stand in front of the big canvas and he would give it the little flick of the brush to turn it into a Rembrandt masterpiece, and then it'd be rolled out to the aristocrat that paid the big bucks for it, and Rembrandt or Rubens would turn out another masterpiece. To understand how these guys cranked out all this great art is really fun to check out as you do the sightseeing in Europe. And of course, in Vienna, you got a lot of musical sightseeing and a wonderful music museum in Venice, and then in Vienna. Then I flew to Brussels and Bruges, and I'm going to be in Bruges in a few days with my TV crew because of sites like this. And that, and that, and that, all good places for on cameras as we do our art series. I mean, imagine standing right there and talking about, the Northern Renaissance or whatever's going on in Europe. One great artwork in Belgium is the chocolate. Madame Dumont, who's been in my book for a long time, just retired. And her sister is also Madame Dumont, and she wants to take over for her older sister. And I had to get some photographs of her so I could pump up the chocolate work that she does. But boy, if you're ever going to get into chocolate, do it in Belgium. If you're ever going to get into beer, do it in Belgium. I love Belgian beer. I'm not a beer aficionado here, I got to say, but in Belgium, I become kind of a beer pilgrim. And I'm always with my local guides trying the new beers. And it's just this wonderful malty, milkshakey, monk-made beer. Famously, the best beer in the world is called West Vetleren. And it's made in a monastery, and it's sold out in advance. You join the club and you get a 6-pack a year or something like that. And that's all they make. And consequently, it's just an exercise in futility to get your hands on it. But one monk left the monastery and he took with him the secret. And he brews his own beer. And now St. Bernardus beer I tried it. I said, this is really good. And my guide said, yeah, it's West Vetleren. It's West Vetleren in disguise. It's one of my new tips in the guidebook to find out these different beers. Chimay is also really good. You can get Chimay here in a nice nice beer counter, but it's nice to have it in its birthplace, and that would be in Belgium. So much to see and do in Bruges and in Brussels. Brussels is a lively place these days. With my guide, I love it when guides have show and tell, little visual aids. Here's a Gothic church, 700 years old. Here's the same church, 170 years old. Well, they took the old church and they decided, we got to kind of raise the bar here. Let's make this Gothic church neo-Gothic. And that's a neo-Gothic version of a Gothic church. Remember, the pointiest things in Europe are not Gothic. They're neo-Gothic. They're from the 1800s, the Romantic age. It's got Gothic bones, but the icing is from the Romantic period. Amsterdam was my last stop on my trip. And this is the view from the train station in Amsterdam, looking out the Eye River. And look at the skyscrapers across the river. There's a new subway, the North-South subway. They've been building it for years. It's been sort of a boondoggle like the Big Dig in Boston. And now it's finally done. And it's the North-South line. And it goes in a couple of minutes under the river from the train station, the central station, to Amsterdam Nord, tying the city across the river into the city proper. And it's just an amazing thing. Every time I land by train in Amsterdam, the first thing I do is I walk a couple of blocks to Frederick's Rent a Bike, and I pick up a bike. And then I walk with the bike and my bag to my hotel. And I've got that bike with me until I walk it out to turn it in when I'm going to the train station to take the train away. I like to have my bike when I'm in Amsterdam. I go everywhere by bike. And it's just a fun thing to do. That should be part of the local scene. I was there on their local Memorial Day. It was a beautiful time to be there. I was wandering the back streets. So many colorful, beautiful corners of Amsterdam. So many pitfalls for tourism. Lots of tacky commercial tourism gimmicks and so on in Amsterdam, like anywhere in Europe. And I just want to remind you, naive, Naive tourists, they look at this and they go, oh, tourist information, good. Go in there, what should I do? Or they say, well, you should see the Body Works or the Ice Bar or Madame Tussauds or Ripley's Believe It or Not or the Torture Dungeon. These are not sites, these are commercial gimmicks. And this is not a tourist information office, it's a sales outlet that gets a 20% commission on everything they sell. And you have one day in Amsterdam, and you shouldn't be spending it at Madame Tussauds or Ripley's Believe It or Not. You should be spending it learning about Anne Frank and the Dutch Resistance and Van Gogh and Rembrandt and Henry Hudson. There's all sorts of dimensions of the Netherlands that you can learn and not have to go to the torture dungeon. So steer clear of these sort of gimmicks on the main drag. A new site in Amsterdam, very powerful site, is the Holocaust Memorial of Names. Amsterdam lost 102,000 people, Jewish Amsterdammers who were taken away in the Holocaust and never seen again, ending up in nameless graves and in mass graves. And a big thing in the people who remember the Holocaust and want to give dignity to the victims of the Holocaust is to remember people deserve to be named. People deserve to be named. You'll see that when you go to Israel, and you'll certainly see that here in this museum because there's 102,000 names on bricks here. And you wander through here, and you really have a powerful moment. And this is right near the Dutch Resistance Museum. And this is certainly going to be an important stop in my new edition because I was there updating the book. By the way, this is another example of a feature that I'll have on Facebook in just a couple of days. I did a video here to give you a much better look at this powerful new site. Another thing Gabe asked me about was the what I learned about restaurants and so on. And this is a restaurant that serves a chef's special, a chef's surprise. Everybody is here and everybody is ordering whatever they're served and everybody is eating really, really well. I love the Jordaan. I love being in Amsterdam, but when you look carefully, you realize what's going on with the canals. The canals are falling down. It's a major infrastructure problem in Amsterdam. And today you'll find that the Dutch people are very busy shoring up their crumbling canals. It's going to be a long and expensive process to rebuild the walls of their canals as they age and they want to be good for another couple of centuries. Pull a lot of rusty old things out of the canals. I was wandering through the Jordaan. The Jordaan is a beautiful district in Amsterdam. And I was always saying, yeah, it's the people. And I met so many people. And these are people who have found their niche and do their creative thing. This is a wonderful woman who lives in a little art gallery that I talk about in my book, but I didn't know her. I got to meet her. She lives upstairs and she loves to welcome the tourists as they come in with my book. And you get a chance to see what she's doing and get to know an Amsterdammer. Just around the corner is Nick. Nick is really into phosphorescence. Things that glow in the dark. His tattoo glows in the dark. And he has a museum downstairs in his basement. And he's been doing this for years. And I was so thankful to see he's still at it, giving private tours several times a day. And if you got the good guidebook, you can meet Nick and you can meet one of the characters. And then down the street, there's Ludo, who runs my favorite coffee shop in Amsterdam. It's called Paradox. I look for coffee shops that would be comfortable for boomers, frankly, people that like classic rock instead of today's rock, and people who want a little helping hand when it comes to sorting through the coffee shop culture. There's so many back lanes that you can explore in Amsterdam, and there's so many cultural experiences you can have if you know where to go and if you have the nerve to step in there and ask questions. Here we have a coffee shop where you can actually smoke a joint in a policeman's wagon, in a policeman's van, a police van. They parked it in the coffee shop just for kicks. Imagine, step into a coffee shop. You don't need to smoke anything if you're not comfortable with that, but you can look at the menu and it says all the different kinds of marijuana for sale, how each one smells, how each one tastes, and the effect of each one. And it's quite inexpensive. It's cheaper than alcohol, that's for sure. And then next door, you've got your munchie shop. I think maybe that's one reason why they have these munchie shops all over the place. But here's another one of these junk food depots filled with American processed food. Here was one of the most beautiful sights I saw in Amsterdam. A few years ago, this was a busy arterial with 4 lanes of fossil fuel traffic. Today, no more cars, more grass than anything else, and rails through the grass for the trolley, for the tram. This is a tram line, this is a bike path, and this is a pedestrian path right in downtown Amsterdam. Here's another version of that. you got your trolley, your tram line, you got your bikers, and you got your pedestrians. Where are the cars? They don't exist in downtown Amsterdam. There are 200 bicycles parked within view here, and no congestion caused by the parked bicycles. If there were cars parked along the road here, like in a conventional urban scenario, you would have a much more congested and claustrophobic kind of situation. But it's a beautiful thing. When it's so quiet, you can hear the birds chirp. Okay, time to go home. And when you're in Europe, if you're an American and if we have yet to change our policies, you got to go to a pharmacy and get yourself an antigen test. This is the most expensive I've seen. I normally pay 20 euros, but it was 40 euros. A euro is about $1 now, so it's 40 bucks a year test here, but generally it's $25 or so. You drop in within 2 hours. In less than that, you'll have an email, and then you look at the email, and it's kind of exciting. And thank goodness I was negative. I get to fly home tomorrow. Again, 1 out of 85. That's the record of this place here. Gets a positive, and then you're stuck in Amsterdam or wherever you are for a few more days. When you travel, you need to have your CDC card. You need to have your shots, and you need to be fully boosted. That's really important for your own benefit, but it also opens the door for you so you're not frustrated as you travel around. I flew home with one of my souvenirs. Somebody gave me a cheese cutter with a little smiley face on it, and you can take that onto the airplane with no problem. When I got home, I had a meeting with my publisher. I told him how much fun I had updating the books, and he said, guidebooks are selling pretty good all of a sudden. In fact, we're doing really well in the market. We got good market share. Rick Steves guidebooks are the top 12 of the top 15 guidebooks for Europe and the United States have Rick Steves on the cover. It's because we love the information. We update these things with passion, and we care about our travelers and the people and the experiences you're going to have when you get over there and put your travel dreams into smooth and affordable reality. Man, we're having fun getting these guidebooks up to date. I came home. First thing I wanted to do was drop in on Monday Night Travel. I was just off the plane. I thought, I'm going to watch Dave and Jena take us to Denmark and see what a great job Gabe and Julianne are doing, and Lisa running Monday Night Travel. And I'm so glad I get to pop in every once in a while and get up to date with all you guys and share what I've been doing. Again, about a month from now, I'll be popping in, and we're going to go to Amsterdam together, and I'll have some more reports because I will have been in Europe since then. But I'm just really thankful for the work that Gabe's been doing. And Julianne, want to remind you, Lisa is not with us tonight because she is guiding a tour. She's in Venice right now. And in fact, we had some Monday Night Travelers that just met her. They recognized her and her voice, and they just got to bump into her in Venice. This is my son, Andy. He just had dinner with Lisa tonight in Venice, as a matter of fact. Andy is well into his first of 3 20-day Best of Europe tours, and he's having a great time. He said his group's doing wonderful. And it's just so fun to think there's that times 60 right now in Europe, 60 buses, 60 guides, and 60 groups, all doing Rick Steves tours from Poland to Portugal and doing it right. Here's a group wearing masks, not to have anything to do with COVID. I went to this on a Sicily tour a long time ago, long before COVID. And this is, you just put on a mask to go to this wonderful bakery and see what the chef is whipping up in that little town. So proud of his culture there in Sicily. Lots of experiences to be had, lots of guides, eager to share them. I got home just in time for my staff to throw me a birthday party. And they found a 50-year-old picture of me when I was in high school. And nobody wanted to eat that. But it was a fun cake. It was a fun party. It's just great to be back. And it's fun to share with you the fun that I just had exploring Europe. All right, Gabe, that's what I did on my spring trip. And I hope that you all found that interesting.
It was a fantastic whirlwind journey. I learned a lot. And we have a lot of questions from people that want to know more. But before we get to those, Rick, can we have our word from our sponsor?
Hey, I think the best sponsor for tonight's entertainment would be a company called Rick Steves Europe. It's 198 people plus you and me, Gabe. And we're kind of happy because, at least I'm happy. I just went into our office Saturday, and just to see the energy. I mean, you were there, and it was just fun. And our books are going well, our TV show's going well, our radio show's going well, and of course our tour program's going. So I'm just thankful we're back in the saddle. I know it's fragile. I know we don't know what COVID's got in store for us, but we're being smart. We're taking care of ourselves and our neighbors, and we're also still reaching out and getting to know the world. You know, when we do our tour in normal times, there's 2 humps of demand. There's spring, and then it gets quiet in summer, and fall. And we've got a lot of sales going on in the spring and summer, but people don't go so much in the summer. They go the fall and they go the spring. And we've got a lot of tours in June, July, and August, and we've decided to put them on sale. So if anybody wants to go in the summer, they're $200 off all of our tours. Any departures for the rest of this month are $200 off in June, July, and August. I'm going to be over there. I'm going to be over there in June, and I'm going to be over there in August. I'm going to be cruising a canal in Burgundy and hiking in the Alps in August, and I can hardly wait. So if you're curious about travel, there's a little budget tip for you. And if you're just curious about our tours in general, go to ricksteves.com, check out our tour program. If we have a very, very straight monthly report on what is the COVID situation, how many of us are over there, how many guides and tour members have tested positive, and what are the lessons we've learned from traveling as we work this pandemic into an endemic and life goes on. And I think it's fair to say, Gabe, you're keeping a tight eye on this too. Nobody's getting seriously sick. People are testing positive, but those who do are generally asymptomatic. And it's an expense and an inconvenience when you have to quarantine until you get a negative test, but that's just the nature of the beast. If you live in the United States, and you could make a case that it's awfully nice that when you get on a plane to come home to the United States, you know everybody on that plane has tested negative.
All right. Well, thank you for the word from our sponsor, Rick. And we have some great questions for you. The first question comes from Diane. You talked about how when you are researching, you have 2 guides a day lined up, morning and evening. Where do you find all of these guides, and how can our viewers find good local guides?
I just really love this listing because when I look at it, it's the symbol G10, Lorenza, G6, Valeria, G10, Sarah, G6, Nadia, G10, Roberta, G6, Michael. And every day I've got 2 guides, one at 10 o'clock and one at 6 o'clock. And in this case, I had so many to set up. I just let my son book all these guides for me. And we have a lot of contacts in our tour program. We have a lot of guides in our books already. And, so this is the pile of information I took with me. I X-Acto knifed, or not X-Acto knife, I box cuttered each of these books. So I'm just taking with me the part that I'll be working on, but you can see there's a lot of information there. And within this pile of information that I worked on, and I filled up a couple of these beautiful Moleskine books where I write down all my notes, and then I cross it off when I put it into my computer. But this is always in my breast pocket here so that I can just grab an information and put it down. People think this is my passport. It's kind of embarrassing. What's your passport doing there? But it's just my Moleskine. But there's a long-winded way to say there's a lot of good guides in the books already, Gabe. And then what Andy did, there's certain cities where I needed more guides. And I just asked Andy to go online and research it. And if you're a guide in Europe, and there's a lot of guides that are trying to cobble together a livelihood that way, you got to be out there in every format, Airbnb activities, guides by tours by locals, TripAdvisor. There's so many ways that you get your name out, and because it's very competitive. And most of these outfits take 20% to connect you with travelers, and most guides are happy to give up 20% of their gross in order to have that business. What I try to do is just find good guides and put them in my book, and I just want them to offer a good price and my people to get a good rate, and it'd be a good experience. And I'm just the conduit. So between those different avenues, you can pretty much line it up. But what I would do is just use the Rick Steves guidebook and email that person and line it up. They're scrambling. They've got calendars they always need to fill up, and it's usually a very good value for half a day for the guide. They meet you at your hotel and you have a good time. I'm just going with the crew in a couple of weeks, and we've got these same guides. I've booked them every day that we're there because I don't want to be fumbling around. I want a local guide to make sure I do it right.
And so some of those new guides that you used might find their way into the guidebook.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so excited because they're quality people. And they, a guide, as you know, because Gabe, our whole world is guides. Guides love to just share. They're passionate and knowledgeable, and their whole reason to be out and about is to enthuse. They're evangelical about art and culture and history and all that. It's just a beautiful thing.
I always say Rick Steves Europe is such a fun place to work because Everybody there is a traveler, so everybody has interesting stories, and everybody there is a good storyteller. They
Yeah,
have the interesting things and they can tell it well.
that makes a good guide.
Rick, we have a question from Peter. You really focus on finding authentic experiences, and we're fortunate because a lot of us can find those through your guidebooks. But do you have any general rules that you follow when maybe you arrive in a new place and are just seeking out? You don't have a guidebook, you're just seeking out authentic experiences?
You know, what you bring to a city or a destination determines what you take out of it. If you know a little bit about the culture, if you go to South France, you should know what's going on with French colonial history and its immigrant situation, because a lot of the people in Southern France are immigrants from Northern Africa with a history, a colonial history. You should know about that culture, and know where you can explore those neighborhoods and those markets. I was just in Brussels, and I went to the African quarter, and it was just fascinating and fun to talk to people, and great restaurants. It was just interesting. Know a little bit about current events, and when you go into a pub or something, know where you sit in order to talk to people. In England, if you go to a pub and you sit at a table, people won't talk to you. But if you sit at the bar, that's just a symbol that you're there to talk. And if you sit at the bar, people are going to talk to you, whether you like it or not. That's because you're sitting where people want to talk, you see, and have some questions. What about Brexit? What about Boris Johnson? What about the Queen? Do you think she's too old to be what about Prince Charles? Or what about the Prince? Or, people love to talk, and buy them a beer and they'll talk your ear off. And it's a great memory. Take a walk. One thing I like to do is just simply put the guidebook down, I like the camera because I get some beautiful, when I'm out doing a photo safari, I find cool stuff. But just take a walk and be an observer. Listen. Be in the moment. Have a sense of where are the people, where's the action, what's happening. It seems kind of common sense, but a lot of people never are in the moment. So take a walk, bring an understanding of what you want to see. The cheating thing to do is simply hire a guide. When I go to Cuba, or when I go to Russia, or when I go to Ethiopia, or when I go to Morocco, or when I go to Turkey, I'm sure to have a guide. And that guide is the more valuable the guide is, the cheaper they are. They're in countries with a low standard of living, and they're just happy to work for a lot less money than you would expect to pay in England. And they meet you at your hotel, and then all of your questions are answered. You've got a friend, a charming person who speaks English and is local. And that's just hard to beat. So,
Rick, speaking of authentic experiences, I know you talk a lot about how, you drink ouzo when you're in Greece, and wine when you're in Italy, and beer when you're in Germany. But Peppa wants to know, we saw some of those American snack food stores. Do you pretty much avoid any American foods while you're in Europe, or is there something that you sneak every now and then?
It's so funny because it just occurred to me now. If somebody said the manager is your long lost cousin and you can have anything in the store you want, I wouldn't want anything. I would, the thought to eat any of that stuff, I'll say politely, just is beyond me. Nothing would appeal to me in there. I'm no model when it comes to healthy food. It's just, none of that appeals to me. I just was in Europe for 6 weeks. I don't think I ever opened a package with some kind of processed food in it. I didn't ever do that. And I never turned my TV on in the hotel room either. So I'm kind of in a focused groove about living well, exercising, eating healthy, and getting my rest, and learning, and then organizing what I learn and bringing it home. My guilty pleasure, I've got a favorite guy that makes toffee here at our market, Pete's Toffee. And I always tell him, you got to chop your toffee into smaller pieces so we don't have to eat them all at the same time. So I take them home and I chop them into small pieces. I put them in a Ziploc baggie, and I had my bag of Pete's Toffee for the whole trip. I would every once in a while give myself a little bit of Pete's Toffee. That was my little homesick comfort food.
Rick, you shouldn't have told me about that. I have a huge sweet tooth, and now I'm going to get addicted to Pete's toffee now
Oh,
that I know it
it's good.
exists.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Of course, you can find that in Europe too, but I'm a little nostalgic about that. So that was my little private treat.
Rick, we have time for one more question tonight. The question comes from Aline, and Aline is wondering, you've now been back to Europe a few times since the pandemic began and are in a bit of a rhythm. What is the main piece of advice that you would have for travelers like me who haven't been back to Europe since 2019 and are maybe feeling a little bit rusty and out of practice? What would your advice to those travelers be?
Well, cut yourself some slack because I was rusty. I'm rusty. I'm awkward. I just feel klutzy after packing. I wasn't my well-oiled machine on this trip. But it was just, I laugh at myself. We don't need to get an A on everything. We're just over there having a good time. Do your homework, call in advance. So the one thing in Europe, they're having a tough time staffing up for things. So you got to be ready to have some delays and some frustrations. And a restaurant will, I noticed it's very hard to write for the guidebook, what are their hours going to be next year? Because this year they can't get the staff they need to be open. So this year's hours are not likely to be next year's hours for the guidebook. But you don't want to go across town to a restaurant that's supposed to be open every day except Monday and find out, oh, during pandemic, they're also closed on Sunday. So call in advance just to double check so you save yourself that trouble. Other than that, travel in a way where you minimize your risk. It is risky, but I think certain people have triple the risk at other people. I have a real high standard about not going into places that are not ventilated. I don't want to be stuck in a party scene without ventilation with a lot of people that are not likely to be fully vaccinated, because this is the virus is still there. And other than that, Europe is. Well, it's very happy news for me to report. If you're really excited to go to Spain for the paseo, if you're really excited to go to Italy to lick a gelato and do the passeggiata with the locals, if you're just really excited to go to Scotland and sit in a pub and have a local person teach you all about whiskey, if you're really excited to go to Munich and clink glasses with new friends drinking these massive beers, all of that you can do. I mean, it's all happening right now. And it's not happening for tourists. It's happening because people are embracing life. They've been locked down. They're out. They're spreading their wings. They're celebrating. And people are hard to keep down. In France, if you always wanted to get your cheeks kissed, you're going to get your cheeks kissed. I don't care about COVID. I'm in France. It's a beautiful thing. And that's the good news, I guess. Hey, I think it's been great to be together. And thank you, Gabe and Julianne, for all the good work you do with Monday Night Travel. I want to remind people that we are going to take next week off. And then 2 weeks from tonight, Steve Smith is going to take us to the Dordogne. Steve is magnificent for your French travels. I'm going to be joining Steve on a canal ride in Burgundy in August. I can hardly wait. And Steve's the man for France. And then the week after that, Anne Long, a good friend of ours, one of our top guides. She lives in the Amalfi Coast down in Sorrento. And she's going to join us to talk about that wonderful slice of the Italian Riviera. And after that, Rich Earl, one of our great guides and consultants, is going to take us to Barcelona and Catalonia. And then after Rich, I'm going to come back and I'm going to take you to Amsterdam, and we're going to have a lot of fun going to the fun city of the Netherlands. So Gabe, thanks again. Thanks to all of you for joining us. And I just want to say happy travels, and it's nice to be home. Ciao.
Good night, Rick.
Good night, Gabe.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and see you in a couple of weeks.